Welcome back to Bookmarked, the channel where we bring books to life. Today, we dive into Gertrude Stein, An Afterlife by Francesca Wade, a brilliant biography that's not just about a life lived, but a legacy constantly redefined. Who was Gertrude Stein? A revolutionary modernist, a lesbian icon, a controversial political figure, and a woman who spent her life crafting not just literature, but a version of herself she hoped history would remember. Let's explore how her afterlife, her influence, image, and impact has shifted over time. The making of Gertrude Stein. Gertrude Stein wasn't born a literary icon. She made herself one. From her early days in California to her formative years in Paris, Stein emerged not just as a writer but as a self-styled public figure. Wade shows how Stein's early experiments in language, what many found unreadable, were deliberate acts of innovation. She surrounded herself with artists and writers: Picasso, Hemingway, Matisse. Her Paris home became a salon, a crossroads of modernism. But her writings, like Three Lives and Tender Buttons, weren't embraced widely during her life. She was more famous for being Gertrude Stein than for what she wrote. And that was by design. Cultivating a persona. Francesca Wade emphasizes that Stein was her own best mythmaker. Through public appearances, lectures, and publications like the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, Stein crafted an identity that blurred the line between truth and performance. The Stein in that book is bold, eccentric, humorous. But Wade urges us to see beyond the surface. Stein carefully edited her persona to make her more palatable and marketable to American audiences. This section explores Stein's calculated public image. She posed as a cultural translator, bringing avant-garde Europe to the masses back home. But Wade argues that this came at the cost of complexity. Her radical politics, her queerness, and her commitment to experimental writing were all softened or sidelined. War, silence, and complicity. One of the most controversial parts of Stein's legacy is her behavior during World War II. Living in Vichy France, she stayed remarkably safe for a Jewish lesbian, in part thanks to her relationship with a known Nazi collaborator, Bernard Fay. Wade doesn't shy away from this. She examines Stein's troubling silence on Jewish persecution, her flirtations with conservative politics, and her refusal to publicly condemn fascism. Was it survival, naivete, or complicity? This section raises hard questions. Wade doesn't offer easy answers, but she insists that Stein's moral legacy is as important to examine as her literary one. The afterlife of a reputation. How has Stein's image evolved since her death? That's the heart of Wade's book. In the 1960s and 70s, feminist and queer scholars began reclaiming Stein's work, highlighting her relationship with Alice B. Toklas and celebrating her as a trailblazer for LGBTQ+ writers. But they also wrestled with the contradictions. How to reconcile her radical form with her reactionary politics. Academic interest in Stein surged. Scholars unearthed her private letters, unpublished essays, and alternative drafts. Wade shows how this scholarly effort reconstructed a fuller, more complicated Stein, one who both resisted and courted the mainstream, who broke rules but also upheld problematic systems. Part 5, 24:00, 28:00, Art, Memory, and Ownership. Wade ends with a reflection. Who owns a legacy? She explores the different ways Stein's image has been used, by museums, universities, queer communities, and even corporations. Stein's experimental art, once obscure, now hangs in major galleries. Her quotations show up in commercials. But is this honoring or flattening her? Wade argues that Stein's legacy is plural. No one group owns it. No single version defines it. Her afterlife is ongoing, a dialogue between the real person, the crafted persona, and the meanings readers make of her work today. Gertrude Stein, An Afterlife isn't just a biography, it's a meta-biography. It invites us to ask how lives are remembered, how reputations are built, and how literature survives long after the writer is gone. Francesca Wade doesn't try to simplify Gertrude Stein. Instead, she shows us the woman behind the myth, and the myth that outlived the woman. It's a compelling, layered book that makes us rethink what it means to leave a legacy. Before we dive deeper into Gertrude Stein, An Afterlife, it's worth stepping back and asking, why this book? Why now? Let's talk about how this biography came to be, and why Francesca Wade, a rising star in literary nonfiction, chose to write it. Francesca Wade first made waves with her 2020 debut Square Haunting, a portrait of 5 remarkable women who lived in Bloomsbury, London. That book focused on how women carved out intellectual space in a world that tried to silence them. With Gertrude Stein, An Afterlife, Wade turns her attention to one of the 20th century's most enigmatic and divisive figures. But this isn't a conventional literary biography. It's what we might call a posthumous biography, one focused on a writer's afterlife, meaning how they are remembered, interpreted, and reimagined after death. The idea for this book took root as part of a broader cultural reckoning. In the past decade, there's been a surge of interest in re-evaluating historical figures through intersectional lenses: race, gender, queerness, power, and politics. Gertrude Stein, once canonized simply as a modernist muse or eccentric genius, was ripe for reconsideration. Wade's book was published in 2024 by Alan Lane in the UK and Penguin Press in the US. It quickly drew attention for its depth of research, its nuanced tone, and its willingness to explore moral grey areas. Rather than presenting a hagiography or a takedown, Wade investigates Stein's contradictions: her radical literary style and conservative politics, her embrace of avant-garde art, and her friendships with fascist sympathizers. What makes this book particularly timely is how it intersects with ongoing debates about public memory. How should we remember artists who behaved badly, or at least, problematically? How do political compromises affect artistic legacies? And who decides what version of someone lives on in history books, museums, and classrooms? In writing An Afterlife, Wade drew from newly available archives, including Stein's private correspondence, early manuscripts, and decades of academic scholarship. But just as importantly, she listens to the cultural noise around Stein, how she's been invoked by feminists, queer theorists, art historians, and even pop culture marketers. This historical lens makes Wade's biography feel fresh, even as it revisits a century-old figure. It's not just a story of who Gertrude Stein was, it's a story of how we keep reinventing her. In many ways, Gertrude Stein, An Afterlife is part of a new generation of literary biography. It's less about chronicling a life from cradle to grave, and more about examining what that life has meant and continues to mean for readers, writers, and thinkers today.